It's episode 8, fellas. Did you think we'd make it this far?
No, I honestly didn't.
I did. I think it's going pretty well. I mean, we're not getting tons of views on the podcast, but I think it's something that's growing. And every week I see more and more people looking at the podcast, and whether they're looking at it on YouTube or they're pulling the audio off for Apple or what's it, Spotify. Mm-hmm. We can't really track that stuff, but I think it's just that slow organic growth is better than being out there trying to, push it a ton. If you get strong organic growth and then at some point we start to push it, I think that's a good way to do it. I don't know if there's a good or bad or whatever, but part of the thing too is we want to get better at this, right? So the more we do without pushing it out there and out without marketing it, it gives us a chance to get better so that when we do push it, it's
hopefully really more polished.
Yeah. More polished, yeah.
And cohesive. No,
yeah, and then I'd like to hear from the audience if some of the things that they'd want to hear more about. Like, is anybody interested in guests? I think we're all very interested in having guests on the podcast. But what is that? Is it video? Is it stills? Is it people on different continents?
Yeah, technicals, yeah.
Technical, yeah. So if you have some input on that, that would be cool to just see what people are looking for, right? Because the more we can do that kind of stuff, I love talking to other people and learning stuff. So the more we can do that kind of stuff, for me, the better. But we haven't even started down that road yet.
Yeah, hopefully it's been entertaining at the very least for some of our shenanigans. I know we had a request to get Sasquatch on the podcast as a guest. So if any listeners know their favorite Sasquatch, we'd be happy to get them on here. I don't know that they're going to be very talkative, but we can try it.
Too bad we can't have AI generate a little Sasquatch running behind our in our rooms.
Although I did order a Sasquatch. It's a little stuffed
animal.
Did you do it? I did. I found one. Cost me $20, but it'll be here. I also found a jackalope that Dean had. So I think we'll have some good characters for that next video.
The reason Brandon ordered a Sasquatch was we came up with an idea for a YouTube video that I have not seen. Some of these videos, we look at them and you're like, somebody's doing something on what is ISO, and it's got 90 million views. And it's so basic, but I think it's so important. But I think we just tend to say, oh, well, we got that figured out. But not everybody has that figured out. But we tend to not do those kind of videos. But I think we will start doing more of them. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I came up with as an idea, which is why we got the Sasquatch, is I don't want to say it because I don't want anybody to steal it, but I think it's going to be really cool. And it's a comparison kind of thing. And it's just a matter of what I have in my head, what I think the answer is going to be. We're going to test it. And it's going to be very interesting to see the differences. So,
but we needed a stable character to be our subject, because I wouldn't stay still and Michael was getting grumpy about it. I'm just fidgety. But we needed a stable character, so I bought a Sasquatch stuffed animal because Sasquatch, right?
And it needs to be in nature, right? It needs to be outside, and it has to be something that is exactly at the same spot with the same look for all these things that we're going to compare. So it should be pretty cool.
Yeah. Actually, you brought up a good point, Michael. How much of the audience actually would benefit or cares to hear about how we talk about exposures, so aperture and shutter and ISO? Can you help us out? Are we kind of going over your heads when we talk about some of these things? Do we need to dive into that more? Is that something that would be an interesting video for you all? Just help us out and let us know in the comments, and we can try and tailor something in the future. But I know sometimes we'll get going and we'll glaze through some of these things pretty quickly. We actually have a question today about waveforms, so we'll see where we go down that.
See how many people.
The thing is, too, is we're not all experts at this stuff. I mean, we go out and shoot, and I feel like I'm an expert with my camera.
Right.
But you give me your camera, I would be a fish out of water. I wouldn't know exactly. I would need to shoot it for a week to really shoot it, watch it, watch the histograms, watch whatever I need to watch that helps me get that stuff correct. And then you key in on the monitor and how that stuff looks to do it. But with my red, I know exactly what I need to do when I need to do it too. So
yeah,
it's hard to be an expert for all these. I mean, we can do the basics super easy, and it probably should be something that we should do. And it probably should be just like a standalone video. You know, you got those 3 basics, which are very important, but I was thinking too, what about like just composition? Mm-hmm. How many people want help with composition? Yeah. And it's subjective. It is totally subjective. There is no right or wrong. So much of my, the reason why I compose stuff the way I compose it was from the old days of when I shot for magazines.
There's still a few magazines, right? And there's a few contests. Actually, it was one of my reminders. There's a contest. It's January 17th is when it opens for the National Wildlife magazine. And so go out there and get your posts in there. I didn't take any award-winning stills this year about nature. So go out there and get that done before it closes. But I think, Michael, you're talking about composition. I think where your background helps, though, is like these thumbnails, right? Because we went out and did a bunch of photos for the bag review that we're putting together. And I had to play model. And that's going to help because we're going to have that room to actually put text on there or do something with. So instead of me being dead center and then trying to find room around like text, we're going to have a nice area to the left or right that actually is usable for that. So I think it still has a place. It's just changing, right? Instead of verticals, like you probably shot a lot of your stuff vertically, right? In the day.
Yeah, you were always after the cover, right? And right. The resolution wasn't good enough back then where if you didn't have a vertical, they weren't going to, more than not, they were never going to cut a vertical out of a horizontal. But now it doesn't matter. So now you can pretty much shoot however you want, and there's enough information to cut it out, provided you left the space to do it. But yeah, there's all that to think about. I don't know. I think it could be kind of cool. I think what we'd have to do is we'd all have to go through our libraries of stuff and just find stuff that is our style for composition and use that as examples. And then also go through our stuff and say, okay, this is really terrible. Yeah. I can't believe I shot this picture because here's the problems with the composition as far as I see it.
I'll handle that field with my photos.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's so much to do, but I think it would be interesting to play with.
I like that idea. Yeah. I mean, the audience let us know. So we are happy to do that. Actually, I have some, do you want to get into what the audience said? I have some things from the last few videos we put out. There's some questions in here. There's just some comments. Do you want to get into that now?
Let's do it.
Cool. So the first one is from Ben. We've talked about Ben before. We actually met him out on the trail, Michael and I did. But he had a comment and question in relation to the Alaska video with the bald eagles that Eric just put out. And he says, right on, Eric, I've been waiting for this. We only see the eagles up in the trees down here, Denver.
Yep.
Not really, but mostly it seems. So it's exciting to see them at eye level. Beautiful stuff. Excellent eagle audio and great job on the pans and catching them while flying. I need a better tripod. Tripods are key, Ben. They're awesome.
Yeah.
Are the modeled ones that don't have white heads juveniles? Were there other photographers out there enjoying the cold? ? You Alaskans have your own definition for a beautiful morning, but yeah, it really is. It looks so cold and you're basically standing there in a windbreaker. Neat to see the bear and other birds and ways they were interacting too. So first one there is just juveniles versus mature ones. And then were there photographers out there?
Yeah. So I was there during a time where there's essentially an event and there were some other tour groups around. So anywhere from half a dozen people to some days, we're spread out over a couple miles, but there could be 30, 40 people around. Just depends on the day. And the weekend, people came in. So, but yeah, the eagles, as far as turning into that classical whitehead and mature plumage, I guess you would say, is like a 5-year process. So when they're modeled, they're probably in their 3rd, 4th year. You can just Google search a cycle and you'll see them moving through. But the juveniles are the, all brown, kind of speckly look, and then they eventually start to turn their head white, and their bodies will get nice and clean black. So yeah, there's a mix of ages there, and they all interact with each other. It's pretty cool to watch them, down on the ground level, having their little battles and fighting. I wish I would have had more fighting. That was really what I was hoping to get to see more of. But with all that open water in the first part of that trip, it was just, there wasn't a lot of competition for food. It was a massive buffet spread out over miles and miles. So they didn't really need to compete for, small little open areas to feed out of. But yeah, thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
I think my favorite interaction you captured was the black-billed magpies pulling the feathers, the tail feathers on the eagles. So
that was,
I think that was my favorite interaction.
Yeah.
Let's see. The next one is from Wild Bill.
Before you go too far, there's a couple other things. So, and I don't know if we talked about this. If we did, just tell me and we can move on. But when Eric was editing this video, he put together a rough draft and he sends it to Brandon and I just to look at it so that we can all collectively put in our 2 cents and try to come up with the best video possible. When he did that, he really didn't have any audio that ended up in the final piece. And then it also wasn't colored correctly yet because it was all shot in log. So it's very just gray tone, flat. But when I watched it, the final version, the audio was awesome. Mm-hmm. So what did you use, or what were, it's so mind boggling to go out as this individual and try to get all this stuff. So you're getting drone, you're getting audio, you're getting wides, you're getting tights, you're trying to shoot yourself doing stuff. You're trying to bring people to the moment. You're doing stuff in the van. There's just so much stuff. And it took you, I don't know, you were there for 16 days or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your thought process and what did you use for the audio? Because in the final piece, when you hear all that audio, it is so much more fun to watch.
Yeah.
To hear all those eagles and to hear all this stuff.
I always knew that was going to be an important component because we've talked and, you always hear the classic thing. I think we even said last week where a crappy video and good audio is going to win out over great video and crappy audio. A lot of it was me digging through archives of audio files that I had and kind of cutting stuff, clipping stuff. I did use a little bit of stock audio from a service that we're subscribed to fill in a couple pieces. And obviously the music was from that too. As far as the process goes, I mean, I've made a couple videos of just when I've gone out and, just shot on trips here and there and tried to put together like a little shorebird thing years ago. But this was really kind of the first time where I was just going to get out and have all my gear and just try and shoot and cover and really dive into how can I try to like capture an environment more. Not to make excuses, but this is the first time I really tried to put together a piece. And from start to finish, I was just, solo out there trying to record everything. So there's some horrible cuts of things that obviously didn't make it to the thing. And I think the other thing that surprised me was, if I had used all the footage, I mean, you're talking 8-10 hours of stuff. I barely used a lot of what I shot. And as I went on, I was more selective. So there was so much to learn during the whole process. But, I would have my main camera going and then either utilize a GoPro or my iPhone to kind of cover myself, which I hate doing, but I had to do it. And hopefully it won't be so awkward as things go on. And then I would, if things were quiet or the audio had an opportunity, I have a Zoom F2 or a F3. And then I would throw a couple of mics on that and just try and go leave it in the woods somewhere for a little bit or under, like the eagles will be perched in the trees up above. So I would go drop a kit there and try and let that record for a little while and get some ravens or eagle calls. And I used some of that. And then also the river's obviously running. So I would try, different distances from the water and things to really play with. But boy, of all the video work I did, the audio, that was like 5% of my time. And I really want to go back or at least, the next opportunity where I try and go do kind of more of a quest like video of going out and exploring a subject, I'll have a really different approach to the whole thing going forward, just because of what I learned sitting here on the edit side, trying to put something together from, what I captured. I can't go back, drive back down there, months later and 14 hours each way to try and fix some things that I didn't quite capture, but I was able to kind of fill in some of those holes with either some old footage or audio and some stock stuff too. But yeah.
Give me a good example of what one of those things is where you're like, oh, I would do it totally different. Is, because there's so many. What is it that you would spend more time on audio, or what is it?
I probably, there were some limitations I think we've talked about where like I had my FX6 and my battery plate makes a lot of noise, so I couldn't record on camera audio, which I fixed. So I didn't have live audio during a lot of what I was shooting. That really frustrated me. I think looking at the shots of me, the composition's horrible, but I can't easily see the back of the screen. And I'm like, oh crap, something's about to happen. Let me hit record and try and focus on what I'm doing. And in my mind, I'm thinking I obviously want just someone there covering me, documentary style, to really make it look good. There's, just a static shot. You can't always see what I'm doing if I turn my back. So those things I think were where they kind of lose maybe some authenticity or some artistic or, cool look to them. It would be nice to have someone there. And then maybe, I guess I kind of think about, storyline, and this doesn't really have much of a story. It's essentially just like a vlog of me going and kind of sharing what I was able to see while I was there. Could there be maybe more of a sequence to pull out of it or something like that? I'd kind of want to explore. Maybe, I don't know that I want to like write a nature type piece, but maybe going in with mixing both like kind of me and my story and with the animals or something. So yeah, there's just a lot of ideas that are cooking around in my head. But yeah, I think I was kind of, obviously you don't like to look at yourself on camera. At least most people don't. And those are the hardest parts. Like, what do I use of myself to try and at least carry some sort of storyline through what's happening? And
let's just give the audience an idea as to your background, because like you said, this is probably the first one that you've put together that is this comprehensive.
I mean, I'll admit it, this is the first time I've ever ran, like 3-4 channels of video and audio in a timeline. That's completely new. So how many times I had to Google how to DaVinci Resolve, X blank to try and, piece my way through. Right. Why does everything keep getting shifted? And I had to start over once because I had done something, incorrect setting it up. And yeah, I mean, I have a doctorate of pharmacy degree. I've never studied anything technical in terms of the video production world or anything. So just YouTube Academy of trying to figure things out and then learning. I mean, the best thing you can do is shoot. And the shooting doesn't do anything until you sit down and look at it on the computer. And then you realize, holy crap, I completely blew this out, or, my screen brightness was really high or something. I was shooting with the old mirrorless back before really understanding how to shoot log and, histograms and stuff and blowing stuff out, or you look at it and it's completely underexposed. So yeah, it's just a lot of trial and error to get to this point. And like I was telling you guys while I'm doing it, I really just want this thing to be done so I can move on to the next, because the deficiencies start to annoy you and you're like, why didn't I do this better? But at some point you have to call it finished and move on to the next thing, which I haven't figured that out yet.
Well, I mean, your preference is to be shooting, right? Not editing. I know my preference is to shoot as well.
Yeah.
But I think that's everybody's preference. And I think what Eric just said is speaks volumes. So
totally.
When I first started doing video, and if you guys watched last week's podcast where we did the story behind the image, that was when I was a newbie to shooting too. And I just really didn't have a lot of I didn't have anybody to teach me, and YouTube wasn't even around at that point. Yeah. So it was just kind of do as you can and then try to pick up classes or workshops here and there just to learn. when I was first getting started on this, I had a real job at one point, right? I was a water quality analyst for a city here in Denver. And they were starting their own government exit channel. And I was like, oh, I want to do video. I wonder if I could get that job. I just knew the right people and I did get the job. I had no background and the guy was willing to take a chance on me. So I learned a ton there. And then over the course of time, we did really well and got it going. But when my point to the whole thing is I would bring in new people, new shooters. Mm. And when I would do that, everybody thinks that they got this all figured out, right? So I would hand whoever the person was a camera and I'd go out with them and I'd say, okay, let's just shoot a little 1 minute or 2 minute thing on whatever it was, a park or a person that works in some fashion for the city, you know, a public service worker or whatever. I wouldn't say anything. I'd let them shoot. And then I would have them edit as well, whatever they shot. And immediately you figure out your deficiencies. Because if you figure out that, oh, well, I didn't hold that shot long enough, or I was way too shaky there, or I didn't give some sort of transition point from this shot to this shot, you figure out so much. And I think that's what you've done, Eric, by doing this piece is, and I have to say, this piece is amazing for being great. Like one of the first ones that you've ever done, right? If you watch this, I mean, it kept my attention the whole time. So having those points where you find like, oh, I should have done this, or I would have been better off if I'd have done this instead of this, or whatever it is, but you don't learn that until you actually have to edit your own stuff.
Yeah.
And so the process is like so valuable. And Brandon, you learned all that too when you were doing your own YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. So I think if you get frustrated with video, if you're out there shooting, just know that you learn so much so fast, because the minute you start shooting stuff and then you go back and you do try to put it together, you immediately figure out these deficiencies in your process, and then you can go back and correct those. So just keep that in mind if you're in the biz. And I still have all of those issues too. I mean, I
was just going to say that.
Yep.
I haven't got it figured out. And a lot of times we're shooting wildlife. It's not like we can tell a model or some sort of actor or something, hey, you know what, I messed that up. Can you redo that? And then can you exit this way? Or can you do this? Because that's how it's going to work best in the edit. When you're shooting wildlife, you're at the mercy of whatever that wildlife's going to do. So you get what you get, and you can't fix it.
Yeah. But like your moose thing, right? How many days? So you were out there for a month, right? Essentially the entire month of late August into September, though. So we'll say 45 days for moose. Mm-hmm. How many times would you go out expecting to see something and then not? Or inversely, you'd go out expecting to see something, you'd see something, and then you'd wait, and then you'd see something epic, but it'd be at the end of the day, and you're like, well, I haven't filmed any scenery today. I haven't filmed about how the day has been. And it's just like, how am I going to tell the story now? I have this amazing piece, but I haven't done any of the other storytelling. Like maybe there's wind. Did you get the flowers blowing in the wind? Or you're by a stream. Did you capture any of that? And it's just like, then you have to go back and you're like, well, it's not snow on the ground today. So now it's spring and it's tough.
That'll
really
happen
tough.
there
And
too.
do you do that every time? So you have 50 mountain shots? Like, I don't know.
I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly there. It is one of those deals that where I mess up that stuff all the time, because you don't want to take away from shooting something epic. So then you don't shoot the scenery, or you don't shoot the water droplets on the plants, or whatever it is. You just don't do it, right? And then, but because you're waiting and you're watching these moose, and you just can't deviate from this vision, because if it happens, you need it.
Right.
But there's so many days where it doesn't happen, and then you're like, well, I didn't get anything today. There's ways to figure it out. There's ways to go around that. There's, what I've found that I need to do is, if I just need to say, okay, well, my focus today is all the other stuff. And no matter what happens, you're like, okay, maybe I'll still get some wildlife stuff, which would be great. But in order for me to tell a really good story, I need to shoot a drone, or I need to shoot the scenery, or I need to shoot the intricate detail stuff. So
you know what's going to happen then, right? Wolverine's gonna like walk through
Right.
and tempt you. I mean, that's what happened to you. You were filming moose, right? And then those wolves came through.
Right. Yeah. And it
So,
totally
I mean,
just
that's-
changes the day, right?
right.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
it usually goes.
And then your mindset
Yeah.
totally changes too. And then you're like,
Right.
Eric and I were both out there, and the wolves showed up, and then that was basically the end of our shoot. Now the moose left because the wolves did show up, but
Mhm.
we basically just jumped on our bikes and rode back. We didn't.
And I don't remember why. Something was going on with my camera that day, and I didn't even have my long lens. And of course, I'm like, well, it's kind of the end of the season. There's probably not much happening. I'll just take a small lens and just try and maybe shoot some of Michael when we get out there. And it's a freaking moose party with like over 20 moose just all doing crazy stuff here and there. There's little ones fighting, chasing each other. You're constantly like on your head on a swivel. What's happening? There's big bulls ready to fight. And here I am with a little 24 to 70, like, oh, damn it. I guess I'll just watch this today. But yeah, it's tough. You never know what you're going to get.
It is.
Plenty of days where we sat there for 8 hours and like, do we go home or do we just keep sitting here? Because we haven't taken our cameras out of the bag yet. And then, you know, that last 30 minutes, the sun drops below the clouds and magic happens. So that's, I think, the exciting part of it all for us. But yeah, you need a crew
All that
of
being
people.
said, I mean, the piece you did is awesome. What you came out with, what you learned, the next one's going to be even
Yeah,
better,
yeah.
and you're well on your way
Excited.
to producing really good stuff. But
Cool.
just all the little different parts of trying to put something together, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
It's way more than stills. I mean, stills, I think a lot of us gravitate towards stills, and we still love doing that, right? But capturing a moment in time with really pretty light is hard, but it's doable. But when you're trying to do the same thing only on video, but then also have the audio and then have all the other stuff to go along with it to actually produce something that's really watchable, it's just a lot of stuff. So I can see why people want to not even mess around with the video unless you're really into it. Now, one other thing is you were saying, you know, what story do I want to tell, or where do you want to go with what you're doing? You know, with YouTube, and what I like watching better than anything now, like I love watching Planet Earth, and I think we've talked about this before, and I love seeing all the beautiful stuff. But I gravitate more now to people in nature and their experiences. So the vlog approach that you took to this video, to me, I think is way more interesting than just watching something on Eagles.
I agree on that. 100%.
You know, I just think just that whole, like the little thing you did in the van where you had you know, it was windy last night and the van was kind of shaking. Let's go check it out and see what, you know, showing the bear tracks and showing that the bear probably rubbed up against, you know, that stuff that's real life. And I think people gravitate towards that more than just a pretty eagle piece.
And the hardest thing is to remember, like, yeah, before you get out of the car, like, wait, stop. I have to hit record and have a camera in front of me. How many times did I just go do something and like, why didn't I record that? That's why I'm like, I need a shadow with the camera aimed at me the whole time. But yeah, once that, like, you know, so that's where I guess when I look back of thinking like, why didn't I shoot more coverage of what I was doing? But again, like you said, it's just that challenge of doing everything. It's too much.
Yeah, I'd like to see you, like, because it's dark, right? So you're probably getting 10 hours of darkness, 12 hours of darkness.
Yeah.
So, like, what did you do during those 12 hours? How did you dry out everything? Because you were in a van, right? You weren't going back to a house that had heating with a furnace.
Yeah.
How
That's
did
a pretty
you
comfortable
dry off your
van.
camera?
Yeah,
still, it's
I've got.
interesting to me. Like, how did you cook your meals? What
I mean,
did
I
you
have
eat? Like,
videos
all
of
these
me
things,
like
right?
rebuilding my camera in the van on the countertop, trying to do it. And I thought about trying to fit it in, but like at some point there has to be some stuff has to fall to the floor. Maybe we could put some of those little short clips out. I can try and edit.
Yeah,
some
we can put them out as
stuff
shorts.
that left out, and show you guys. That's the hard part. And then also you're on and you're so focused on everything that you kind of just need to relax for a bit too. So, you know, I would try, and I realize now, you know, trying to edit that I need to change my approach to managing all the files and how do I organize things every day. You know, I tried to pull selects every day, but I think I want to do it a different way next time. So it was a lot of downloading, backing up. Plus, you're shooting, a phone. I have, a mirrorless camera, say doing time lapses, and then I'm running FX6, and I got audio clips to cut. After a while, it's just there's a lot of stuff to do at the end of the day, trying to charge everything. So I do have a heater in the van, so I can run an S-bar heater that just pulls from my diesel tank and keeps it warm in there. I didn't really run it that much because I hate to have all the moisture issues and condensation. So I'd usually keep it kind of cold in there. But once I got everything kind of put away, I would crank the heat in the evening just to kind of dry out all my clothes and warm up before going to bed. So yeah, but yeah, those are all fun things to see too. And that it's like when you're on a vacation with friends, you pull out the camera. My wife's better at, filming what I'm doing. I just don't ever think about it. And I guess maybe a mix of that is also that I just don't think what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is that interesting because I do it all the time. And so it's hard to have those fresh eyes on what's happening. I see what you guys do and I'm like, oh, I have all these questions, but when it's something I'm doing, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I've been doing. So yeah, maybe we'll get better at. And I'm thinking like, what do and that kind of spurred a lot of questions in my mind of like, and I'm still trying to figure this out too. I've been going through, we did interviews with Moose Man, Rick, and then his wife, Libby, and kind of exploring, what gets them out and why do they enjoy, going out and moose. And I've been trying to answer those same questions in my head. I think I really like more of like the photojournalistic type of view. I've always liked kind of in the field, following around like war journalism or exploring some topic or conservation issue. I think I've found that I kind of like to be behind the camera and follow the action and read people's body language and stuff. So I think that would make really more captivating behind the scenes. You talk about Planet Earth, and I always like the behind the scenes as much or more sometimes than the sequences. So, I think I want to try and explore some opportunities with that.
Eric, I think you hit the nail on the head there too with watching the behind the scenes. For me, that's always way more fun because they do mix in enough footage of the wildlife, but then you're seeing how the sausage gets made, which is kind of cool. And
the excitement
all the trials
from
and tribulations,
camera operators, and the challenges and that all, pretty cool.
Yeah. So that would tie into something that we could talk about, Brandon. But I think there were a couple other questions about Eric's video, and maybe we should do those before we move on.
Yeah, I have one more about the video, and this one is going to get a little technical, so I'm sorry, folks. This is from Alexander. He goes, "Thanks for the video. I'm a little confused why you overexpose so much. Highlights are almost crashed. According to Sony's own white paper settings for S-Log3, are white 90%, 100% IRE, -61%, and mid-gray at 41%. But on your waveform at 2140, I saw much higher settings. It looks like you leave the zebras from S709 or Cinetone and expose for S-Log3. Or maybe I'm wrong, question mark." So maybe you can just talk about filming, and this is in relation to a shot on a eagle next to a riverside.
I think that he had a link where there's a shot of me.
Yeah.
So he can see my monitor and the waveform that's on the screen itself.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, the quick answer, I guess, it's snow, so it's white, and you can't really. I mean, you have to, if you shoot snow and you just let it like on auto meter, it wants to make it neutral gray or something, say for a still. You have to kind of overexpose, not overexpose to where you're clipping, but exposing to the right to kind of capture it. I mean, there's so many factors, and I sitting here, my 2 seconds, I don't have a quick answer, and obviously I don't have the the technical degree to answer it all. But yeah, I mean, there are shots that maybe I did blow out. I think obviously looking at color correcting on like $1,000 monitor versus some $10,000 professional color graded thing, and then not uploading it to YouTube that does whatever they do. I haven't watched it on my screen and then watched it on a TV to see how exactly identical, if it does change things, or maybe it does look brighter that way. And that obviously could be something to learn from. But Yeah, I mean, essentially, I'm trying to push the upper limits shooting in the snow so that on a black subject like a bald eagle, where the lights may be beside it or behind it and you have shadows, it's trying to get as much of that shadow detail as I could without, clipping the snow, I guess, was really it. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
I
you're in
have
opposite ends,
found,
right? Blackbird,
yeah,
whitehead, white snow.
yeah, it's tough subject. There's still a lot of room for me to grow. So yeah, I appreciate it. And it'll be something now that I'm kind of curious. I want to open those files and kind of pixel peep at them. But honestly, if you don't like the looks of it, I'm sorry. I can try and look into it more. But at some point, it's also like, I'm not going to get that technical or send Brandon out next to a bear with a white card to try and meet her correctly. But we talk, yeah, just fling it out there and hope. But yeah, I don't have a real good quick answer. Technical.
I think the quick answer is like we talked about. This is like your first approach at producing a full-on piece, and what you got was pretty amazing. And if you messed up a couple of shots, and they may not even be messed up, you're not a full-time color grader, right?
Yeah,
so if you give those files that probably have the information there to someone that does this for a living, they may get it just right. And I think you just hard to compare what we're shooting to something that's going through a $1 million production where they have the budget to fix everything. I know when I'm out shooting, as long as I just use a histogram, but as long as I'm not clipping on either end, I know that they'll fix it. I don't have to fix it, and I might not be able to fix it if it was left up to me, but I know a professional that does this day in and day out, they're going to get whatever they need to get, especially if you have the camera that has that information there, like a Red or a FX6 or whatever. The information's there. It just, I guarantee you, I do not have the talent to fix that.
Yeah.
Or to make it perfect. And like you said, I don't have the $5,000, $10,000 monitor that is going to nail it perfectly once I do fix it. I'm just using the Apple monitors that are pretty good, but not perfect. Yeah. And then the whole YouTube thing, like you said, when you compress it,
who knows?
Upload it, and they're doing all this stuff. Yeah. But overall, I mean, it was clipped a little, not clipped, but there wasn't as much detail in the white when I watched it on a regular TV. And I don't have any fancy TVs either. I just have a regular I don't even think my TV's 4K, the one I watched it on. It's just an HD. So I could see that some of them were it didn't bother me. If I was not a photographer or a videographer, I don't think I would even have noticed it. But when you do notice a little bit. You're like, oh, that's a little hot. But it didn't take away from the story, and it didn't take away from what was going on.
From my perspective, Alexander, I don't think you're wrong. When I'm doing commercial stuff, I have a 41% zebra setting that I use for skin tones. That way, because you're always worried about properly exposing skin tones. That's your focus, right? And so I've set up a 41% zebra, and that's how I'm looking. I'll just have them hold a gray card next to them. Does everyone know what a gray card is? I think I have one. But it's just a card that's 18% gray, or the middle gray that everyone calls. And they make these cards that you can just hold up. And so I just have my talent hold it up. And that way, once I see the zebras on the 18% gray and their face, I know everything's properly exposed. And then we can just go from there. So I don't think he's thinking about it wrong. But I don't film in 100% white area. It's always a studio like this or a building or something like that. So, but even in buildings, everyone's experienced this, you're trying to take a picture of your kid or your dog or something like that in your house, and you go to take a picture of it, and they're in front of a window. When that camera sees that window, it either exposes for what's outdoors, or it wants to expose for the subject, and then blows out everything outdoors. So you can't have it all. Well, I say that, but you're red, Michael, and those reds you can bring back a lot just because it's raw. And so the Sonys don't film in RAW unless you're exporting it out to like an Atomos or something. So
yeah, but I think you're right. I don't think he's wrong in asking the question, and I don't think it's a bad thing at all. It's more of just
very technical and just more of the,
Yeah.
for me, it was just real world. I've never shot in a studio and have cards. I'm just trying to make do with whatever's lights out there and expose the best. I have noticed when I've shot, say, darker subjects that when I've tended to expose a little bit more bright, trying to retain subjects, I realized how much kind of the detail I was losing or how much it affect the looks of the shadows. So yeah, there's still stuff that I'm trying to go out and shoot in different light and just not, specifically on a subject, but just to see what it looks like in the back end and finding that I still have stuff to tweak. And that trip was the first time I had that monitor too, and trying to find the right settings and focus peaking. And I had gotten rid of using a follow focus wheel and using the lens. And so there was just a lot of things that were going on in my head. If it was pretty close, that was good enough for me to get through it all. But yeah, it is fun to dive into those technical talks because you do learn a lot and things from it. But
well, it forces you to think about it, right? Because if someone's calling you out on it, it's like, okay,
yeah.
well, I should pay. There are people that pay attention to this stuff. Let's just see how
you watch the video 20 times and you're like, the audio there was wrong, or this cut needs to be fixed. So you're looking at like that technical aspect of it. And after 4 or 5 passes, you're like, I don't want to look at this anymore. And then, or maybe you're just missing some big global thing when you're fine-tuned listening for audio normalization. I mean, how hard is that? And I think there's a spot where the audio kind of dips, but gosh, how many passes can you make on this when you're trying to do it? And then I'm like, well, maybe I should just shoot for 3 days and only make 5 minutes. Then I don't have to rewatch a half an hour over and over and over. So yeah.
Well, and audio is so iterative. You don't get audio the first time. You don't get it the second time. It is an iterative process, in that you're always adding. There can always be more.
Mm-hmm.
So audio is tough.
Oh yeah, you could just keep going.
Here's that color checker.
Yeah.
So this is a gray card for everyone. You have white at the bottom, black at the top. This is your 18% gray, or your middle gray that everyone exposes for. And then this is the color code on the back. You use this just to check your color casting on, like, reds, for example. They come with different, they're called OLPFs, and they have ones for skin tones. They have standard ones. They have monotones. What else am I forgetting, Michael? There's some other ones. But
there's 4 of them, yeah.
Yeah, depending on what you're using, it can create different castings in your colors. And so if you hold this up, you can then, when you're color grading, you can then grade it for what these colors should look like.
And that comes into play more when you got multiple shooters with multiple cameras shooting all kinds of stuff. If everybody's using the same chart, then a lot of times you can get to the same, this red is this red on every camera that you're using, or every light condition that you're using. Yeah, the simple way is, if you're out shooting with someone, it's great in one particular kind of light, hold up that gray card, meter off that gray card in that light, and use that setting. If the light changes, you got to do it all again. If you don't have a gray card and you're shooting with somebody, just use skin tone. And I was always taught just to use the back of your hand. If you can do it, just zoom in and meter off the back of your hand, because it's very close to the 18% gray. That's if you're super anal about it. A lot of times as wildlife people, we're not out there with anybody else, so you really don't have it. So you can look for a rock that looks close, or you can look for a tree bark or whatever and get very close. But that's only if you're, if it's just so dynamic and things are changing so much, or it's too bright or whatever. I mean, most of the time now I've been shooting long enough that I can just guess and get it close. And I just go off of that. And then I cheat, because with the red, you do have so much information in there that it can be fixed. Yeah. So the cheaper end, the lower end cameras are harder because you don't have that flexibility. So you pretty much got to get it pretty close to right from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I found the FX6 does not have as much leeway as, it's a mirrorless camera, essentially. It's the same sensor. So it does not have as much leeway as you might think sometimes. But I think that was a great question.
Yep. Yep.
Let's see. I had one more question, Michael. This one's probably best by you. This is in relation to your building a wildlife camera, the professional rig, not the Canon. This is from Bruno. He asked, what is the battery brand model you recommend? And he's to V-mounts is what he's asking.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many. And V-mounts I started out with the gold mounts, which was the thing for a while, and then everybody switched to V mounts, and I don't know why. It's probably because Red came out with V mounts as their native attachment, or whatever the case is. V mounts are the way to go now. Battery technology is really good now, so they're getting smaller, they're getting smarter, they're faster to charge, they last longer, all that kind of stuff. I just see what gets sent to me when I'm doing a production, so I get to cheat a little bit. You know, if somebody hires me to do a shoot and I'm using their gear, they send me the stuff, and then I get to see what other people are using, and it's usually coming from a professional rental place in the UK or somewhere like that. So you get a wide variety, and more than not, what I see now is Bebob and Hawkwoods. Those are two of the more common ones that I see out there. IDX makes them too. There's Blue Shape. I've used those. Anton Bauer makes some good stuff. It's really hard. But if I had to go buy, or what I did buy for myself, is the Bebob. And I think Eric's using the Bebob as well. Same. And I think they're all priced very similarly. A lot of it can just be on availability. You know, if I could get it from Precision or B&H or someone local, you know, in the US, because Hawkwoods, I think, is based in the UK. So that means it either has to be warehoused by like a B&H or someone like that in order to get it. Because, you know, shipping lithium batteries is difficult on a plane. I had that problem. Yeah. So I went with the Bebobs. I know Doug, y'all, if you listen to Wild and Exposed podcast, or if you've listened to our podcast, we've talked about it before. I think Doug went with the Hawkwoods, which that kind of blows too, right? Because if we're out shooting together, we can't use the same charger. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. I mean, you want to try to, if you got a group of people shooting together that, like all three of us, we should probably all just land on that same battery. And that way we can share and mix and match, and we have chargers. That way it just makes it a much easier process. But V mounts are pretty cool. And the problem that Eric was mentioning earlier with that, you know, both you guys have adapted your FX6 to accept V mounts, but it comes with a whole nother set of issues, right? Whether it's creating noise from the actual connection, and what Eric was referring to earlier is there's a hum or a buzz introduced by that accessory, so that kept him from actually shooting audio native to the FX6, which would have been cool if he could have got a shotgun on there. But it's that connector, and then it's just the manufacturer. It's a ground issue, more than likely, and it's just not perfect. But you know, it's a cost thing too. You need to go out and spend however much money you need to spend to find the one where people took the time, but it's going to cost more to get the right accessory to prevent that hum or that buzz or that hiss or whatever it is. So it's like everything we talk about. There's a million little issues that end up happening, and you just got to navigate through. And hopefully a podcast like ours at least introduces these issues, and it's something to think about, because you can't think about it all. There's just no way. I run into stuff all the time where you think you've got it figured out, and then something happens and you're like, oh, well, I either need to go buy this, or I need to do this differently, or whatever it is. So
yep, I feel that.
Yep.
Well, it's funny that we're talking about that. I just adapted my Red, because it used to be Arca Swiss, right? But now that you use these bigger cameras, I'm using that LWS system where it's like a larger plate that it latches into. But then I had that plate, and you can go onto like an Arri dovetail that's longer, so you can slide it down. So when you're using, let me back up, because that was a lot of like jargon. So on our cameras, we use the Arca Swiss plates on the bottom most of the time for small mirrorless setups. Well, when I adapted to the bigger FX6 and the Red, I was still using Arca Swiss, but they were big plates, so that I had the range of movement when I changed the large lens, and you have a big old heavy V mount on the end. You need to change it on the tripod where it sits. So I bought a dovetail plate, and that allows me more flexibility in where I put the camera when I move from like a 28 to 135 up to like a 200 to 600. But in doing that, it changed all my mounts. And so I just adapted the Red to an LWS system. But then it's like, now I'm carrying the LWS system around on the big cinema cameras, and I still have Arca Swiss, and it's just like there's always a compromise, I guess, is what I'm getting at, and there's no right answer. So just pick the rabbit hole you want to go down.
Exactly. That actually brings up a whole nother topic for a podcast or a little short for YouTube that we do. Not a short, but just a little 5 or 10 minute video where tripods, I get those questions all the time. What tripod should I use? And my answer is the biggest, heaviest tripod that you can afford and that you want to carry is what you want to use. But what Brandon's referring to and what he's trying to accomplish is balance.
Right.
So if he lets go of that camera, it's going to stay where he let go of it. You can't be shooting this really beautiful shot and have an animal walk out and then you let go of the tripod and the camera flips up or, is not balanced correctly. And then it just messes up the flow of the video. Right. So, that would be probably another good video that we could probably do and just dig into. I think between all of us, we got so many different tripods that you could show the examples on what actually happens. And then also the operation of tripods and how to operate them correctly, because there's so many little, and everybody's got their own little method or way of doing it, but it's interesting just to see how it works.
Yeah. You can put in the picture we took last week, I guess, the week before, of all the tripods we had set up filming in the studio.
Yeah, and they're all different. There's not one similar, not the same one.
Yeah.
But it's expensive too. I mean, Brandon, I don't know, you probably bought the most recent one, and it's the one I would buy if I felt like I could afford it right now. But I don't know. You bought it used and was still what, 6,000 or 7,000? Am I right?
$7,000. Yep.
Used 7,000 just for the tripod. But then that means you have to have
just the
sticks
head,
or legs that actually hold that kind of weight, and then you got to be willing to carry it too.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not a light piece either.
I think that would be a good one to do. And what baffles me, well, it doesn't baffle me. It's just a factor of people, I think, is someone will go out and spend $10,000 on the lens. This is back in the stills days, but they would use a little, what is it, a slick or silk or whatever those old tripods were. They just a little aluminum, just little flimsy things, and you throw a $10,000 lens on it, and you just you're wondering why you weren't getting good stuff.
Bad boys.
That I see it all the time where people, but you can make it.
You don't know
too.
what you don't know, though.
Exactly, you just don't. So that would probably be a really good video for us to do. All right, so what else do we have? I have a couple of comments about what we were doing this week, but did you want to go into something else?
I just have 2 comments. One is from Tim. This is in relation to our commentary around the introduction of wolves last week. He mentioned a few books. So if you're reading about wolves and like books, he mentions Of Wolves and Men by Barry Lopez, The 9 Mile Wolves by Rick Bass, and The Arctic Wolf by David Meck. So those are a few books. And then the last comment is from Wild Bill. Wild Bill, I love reading your comments. He says he was going to watch the Alaska video that Eric put out with a nice glass of bourbon. So my question to you is, what bourbon did you end up drinking? I have been drinking some Blade and Bow here recently, and it is not my favorite. So it's all yours, Michael.
So just a little update as to what we've been doing here lately. Eric's been out a little bit, just roaming around Anchorage that we've talked about. Nothing too great, right?
Yeah, just the new
you
year.
Said you were out doing some birding.
There's a funny little joke or a little cartoon. I think, what is that? Family Circus or something. That's like, I'm staying up. It's a little picture. Maybe I'll share it to you guys. It's like, I'm staying up till midnight. So until my eBird checklist resets to 0 for the new year. So all the birders out there who are listers that like to keep a year list, when January 1st rolls around, it's a short day here, but I always use that as a good excuse to get out and start birding and seeing what's out there. It was actually fun because I went to a couple areas in town that I hadn't been in a year or two, kind of being distracted by work and learning video and stuff. I got away from it, and man, the spruce bark beetle kill in some of the parks in town is just massive. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those trees are now even gone. So a lot of the woodpeckers are moved on, and it's just young growth, and it was pretty quiet. But the grand total, 3 or 4 days of birding in Anchorage in the winter, I have 24 species, so that's pretty
Nice.
small amount for here. There's nothing better than the first day in spring when the ducks show up and you can hit a 30 species, count in like a matter of 20 minutes. But 24 for 3 days of hiking all over town in different parks. That's about the best I could do. I think 30 species,
what woodpeckers do you
32
have up there?
species is. So the downy and hairy woodpeckers are the most common. We can get
Okay.
American three-toed, which is what I was searching for, but those areas are
Okay.
different. And then black-backed woodpeckers come in when there's a burn. So we've had some wildfires, both natural out of town, and then there's been some, unfortunately, some homeless camp fires in town. But man, while that can still be smoldering, those black-backed woodpeckers fly in, and that's their mainstay for food source and
Really?
habitat until it kind of a couple years it cycles out. But yeah, they're smell that smoke or what, and they come in right away. And so that's our friend Ray here in town. We're thinking about going and checking out one of those burns, but just trying to figure out how to get in there with 4 feet of snow, and it'll be interesting. But
So are they
Yeah,
all
that's-
year-round residents?
those
All
will
the ones
be
you mentioned?
Yeah. You could also get northern flickers here, but I've had like one overwinter one time I saw it, but they're usually move out.
Oh,
I don't
we
know.
have a lot of those
A
down
couple
here.
other ones, but nothing else that's really common. Mainly just hairy and downy woodpeckers.
Okay.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Brandon and I have been staying busy with not wildlife.
Not in the least bit.
We have been sitting in a garage shooting a bunch of how-tos, or you did a bag review, and then you also did a little short video on hybrid shooting. So that
Yeah.
means we're using a DSLR for both stills and video, and just the way he does it. Some of the settings that he uses, and just to give you the quick ability to switch between stills and video, and that way you can shoot both, which I think is
Right.
probably what most people are doing. I don't know, it's a
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
We're all three more video based, I think, and video is always top of mind, and I'm always video just because the camera I have, I guess it'll shoot stills, but I don't ever do that. It's just all for video. But if you're shooting a hybrid or a DSLR of some sort, which is the A1 or the R5 or the Z9 or any of those, they're
Any
all
of those,
really
yeah.
great at both of them. Just how he approaches that process, which is kind of cool, and hopefully it'll be interesting. And then the other day we were like, well, we need to. So Brandon did a bag review on this bag that he really likes, with the exception of a few little dumb things that could be improved. So we're like, we should go get some B-roll of him with this bag. So you wouldn't believe how hard it is to find a really cool place around Metro Denver where you can get something that looks kind of cool. One of the places that I thought would be perfect, they were doing tons of construction, so we couldn't shoot very much there. And then you start driving around these other places. Oh, I know this place over here. We can probably get away. And what I was thinking, and it goes along with what Eric said earlier, we should have shot that process of us looking, because that is just as interesting
Totally.
as
Totally.
we both had our cars because we live in different parts of town. So we met at this spot, and then we both jumped in one car and we just started driving around. We're just kind of shooting the bull as we're driving around. But that would have been probably a good, fun thing just to bring people into the day in the life kind of what we were doing. But I think we ended up doing something really cool as far as getting B-roll, because we finally found a good spot to do it. But then we also,
Then we did an
Brandon is a
video.
gear. Y'all want to just like tune in just to see the amount of gear that Brandon buys weekly,
Hey,
because
now.
he showed up. And maybe your wife shouldn't listen to this, but
Yeah.
he showed up the other day and he's like, so I got this Sony mic system, and then I've got this DJI mic system, and then, I went ahead and rented the Rode mic system because we should compare them all. And it is super awesome to have him have the thought to actually do this, because there is no perfect system. So you're really having to choose.
Recording hell right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Well,
like,
So, we got to back up. Michael is like, he's done this. Like, he knows what he needs to know. He knows the sun's going to rise and the sun's going to set, and he knows all his production and everything's going to work out. I am still, so I'm like beginner intermediate, I'll say. Like, I'm learning, I know some things, but I'm still stupid enough and don't know enough to get myself in trouble. A lot of trouble sometimes. And so audio is important when you're going out and recording clients and different things. But I'm always trying to make things better. And so this is one of my big problems is I'm always like, this could be better. There's got to be something better out there. When in reality, it's good enough. But I hate the phrase good enough because it just, I don't know.
Yeah,
I have to credit that to my dad. Like, if I said good enough, it was like game over in our house. Like, that was as bad as a cuss word. And so, like, good enough to me is not good enough. And there's got to be something that's better. And so I'm constantly trying to iterate into this. So when I first started out, like doing, I'm going to go be a videographer type thing, I bought these little DJI mics. And they're fine for recording, like talking on camera like this, it would be fine. As soon as you get out of line of sight, or as soon as I put it behind me, because I got some girth on me. As soon as I put it behind me, it loses signal because it's all based on eyesight. And so you start getting and upgrading into this audio set. Well, this is like year 2 of me going through this whole process. And on the actual production side, I use Sony UWP lav mics, which are fantastic. They're radio frequencies, but they're almost $2,000. And most of you don't need a $2,000 microphone lavalier setup to talk to a camera, right? So like, that was where my mind was, is what can you throw in your bag and what can you do with your microphones to do this? Now, my last thought is, my biggest fear is that my wife, I'll die, and then she's going to sell everything that I own for what I told her I bought it for.
We got to be at that garage sale.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. She'll be like, I got this camera. Do you guys want it for $200? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
Yeah.
But we ended up doing something pretty cool where it was just off the cuff. We were out in the middle of nowhere. He has his 3 mic systems. So we had Rode, DJI, and Sony.
Mm-hmm.
And we just did a quick little comparison that I think is going to be a really interesting video. And
yeah,
they're all good, but there's not one of them that has everything. So you really got to pick and choose. What do you want 32-bit float? Do you want a better battery? Do you want it seamless? Do you shoot Sony? Is it Sony that would be better just because you're shooting Sony? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just so many. Does it record internally? But we just kind of did a little highlight video. And me not be even messing around with any of these mics ever, I would like to get one. So I thought, this would be great. I'll just get to figure it out. I walked away like, I don't know. They're all good in some way. Yeah. What do you use? What's the best one? What do you want to plunk down $300 on? Because that's about what we're talking, right? $300-$400.
Three. Yep, exactly. Yep.
So while it's a lot of money, it's not like you're going out and buying a $5,000 camera, and you can get really good audio with these things. And it is going to serve your purpose if you're doing something like what we're doing, or even if you just want to capture decent stuff out in the field. But none of them do. There's not one that does it all awesome.
No. Well, and like these little, does everyone know what we're talking about? The little DJI and Rode systems. You'll see them on YouTubers nowadays. They'll put them in their chest or clip them on their lapels. That's what we're talking about. But my thought for wildlife was, well, if I can get these things to record well, I could go stash it out somewhere where I'm hoping something is, much like our GoPro camera traps, go stash it out somewhere and capture some audio that can then transmit back to my video that doesn't have me moving around or anything near camera. But I haven't got it to work. So it's just, I don't know. I have these grand ideas and then they just fall flat on their face. And so I try to solve all of these issues, and it just comes to me spending more money than I should on things that don't actually work more often than not. Like, I still have 6 batteries in the garage, Michael, from yours and mine last bad decisions on camera traps for GoPros. But it's just life. If you want to, I think it's just part of the process if you want non-standard, just nothing that's been seen before, right? Most people don't need to do that. If they want to go take a picture of a bear or a moose or a video of a moose, they don't need to be doing this. But we want like the little noises, right? Or like we just put out I think it's out there, a short that has the moose sniffing the camera and you can actually hear it making the, and it's awesome. So we want more of that stuff. So
right. Well, hopefully us doing this stuff will give you some ideas so you don't have to go out and buy everything like Brandon does. And,
right.
And you can just take all the information and say, oh, that one will work.
Yeah.
Because I could come up with one that I thought would work for me. Out of what we did, it may not be perfect, but it's going to work. So that video is going to come out. And then his whole bag video, I was actually intrigued by that bag too. It's kind of cool, but it does have some deficiencies. So stay tuned for those. And we had some fun shooting them, and we're going to be doing more this week just because, you know,
'tis the season.
'Tis the season to be doing the how-tos and, but any feedback you all have on stuff like that you want to, is it composition? Is it audio? Is it tripods? Is it
exposure?
What is it? All those things. Yeah. Basic ISO, you know, everybody's out there doing ISO and they're doing exposure, but a lot of times people are doing it in the studio. And can we do it differently for wildlife? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we can, but is it going to be of interest? I'm sure it probably is. We should probably just answer our own question and go do it.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I was going to ask you a question. How is the bear trip doing? Did you get that almost? I think you had a few spots last time I talked to you. Do you still have
I think there's
one or two
still
open?
I think there's 4 open.
Okay. So there's still some space.
Yeah, still some space. So if you're wanting to go on a bear trip, sign up for that. Let us know on the story behind the image if you guys like that, because I think we have some other images that we can do that with. One of them is a picture of an eagle that I shot way back in the day, which is kind of cool. And I ended up doing a poster of it. Oh, yeah. And I just recently found, I don't know, like 400 of those posters that never got sold. So we're going to throw that up on our website. If you're all looking for a gift for somebody, an eagle poster it's kind of a cool shot that, these things are just sitting in my shed. It would be great to get them out there. So that's going to be up on the website for sale. We're going to have some other stuff too, right? That you have up on there.
Yeah, I got that all up there. So I think we're good to move forward. For Glatz Nature Production, there is a Bigfoot shirt up there. So.
Oh yeah. Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Anything else on your side, Eric?
No, not anything to add really.
We should have our GoPro 3 ways to use a GoPro out here in the next couple of weeks. Brandon's getting super close on that one, right?
I'm excited about it. You know, one thing that I'm learning is that I talk too much and I push people down tangents. And so then when I stand next to Michael on these videos, because we stood next to each other and filmed ourselves, and I am just squirrel, right? And so I'm having to do a lot more editing work than we should have. But it's coming together awesome. So this is the first time I will say in an edit where I have more footage than I am possibly ever going to need, to the point where, because you get through these edits most of the time and you're like, oh, I wish I had this, or I wish I had a majestic mountain scene or whatever it is, right? And there's always that I wish I had. There's too much video on this one because it was 8 months of work between the two of us, and we filmed almost every day we went out there. And so it's just like finding the footage sometimes is hard enough. So I've been spending hours just watching it and marking it in and out and using my new keyboard. So that's been useful. But yeah, I'll have it out here. I'll have first draft probably this week, and then we'll follow up and iterate and get it back out for y'all. Y'all.
Well, thanks for tuning in, and